Hi, this is Carrie with Carrie Concealed in the Active Self-Protection Extra channel, and today we're going to cover part 4 of our series, The Right versus the Ability to Remain Silent.
Lucky Gunner is my recommended trusted provider of freedom seeds for range or defensive use. In stock, good prices, and rocket fast shipping are why I go back again and again. Because of new guidelines, I can't link their site or say it, but you're smart and you can find it with a simple Google search. Stick it to the man by paying them a visit today.
As you may know, there is much ado about what to say to who after a critical incident, lethal force type encounter. Some trainers say nothing. Some attorneys say nothing. Some people say I have nothing to hide. I am going to tell them everything. And some folks have a scripted statement, and others have a non-scripted statement with a checklist of what to say. Whatever it is that we do, I know we're not going to just rely on the standard, I was in fear for my life, expecting that to be a get-out-of-jail-free card. So before we decide what to say, I like to think about who I'll be talking to after a critical incident, and then the purpose of that interaction. So the very first people that we're most likely going to be in contact with are the 911 call takers, right? It's important, I think, for us to remember that this is going to likely be our first interaction with asking a member of the, doesn't matter what state, local, federal, but a member of the government to help us. And I think it's important to remember that those people that arrive to help, that I called for help, are the people who are writing reports and investigating the situation. The state, they work for the state, and the state is who could prosecute. And that was just, I don't know why that was just such a rude revelation to me, but it was a number of years ago. That's not good or bad, it's just the way it is. But we want to be mindful of that. So let's talk about, there's 3 different groups of people that we'll be interacting with in a use of force encounter. The first is the 911 call takers. So it's important for us to remember, and I know that FLP and Mr. John have talked about this on the channel before, but it's important for us to realize that when we press the second one in 911, that second one, that's when the recording begins. Not while it's ringing, or the recording doesn't begin once the ring starts or once the person answers. The recording's already been going that whole time. So calling 911, everything after that is being recorded as long as the line is connected. So first thing to think of maybe is, if possible, have someone else call 911 for you. If there's someone there that was a witness to the incident or not, even if you can just yell at somebody, hey, call 911, and ask them to call for you. No matter who's doing the call, if you're asking someone to call 911 for you, or if you're calling, it seems prudent and maybe somewhat advisable to simply say there's been a shooting at, and then give the address. There's been a shooting at 123 Williams Way. Or there's been a shooting at the corner of Alberta and Francis, if you don't know the exact ambulance. So there's been a shooting at the location where you would say that, and then send police and ambulance, and then hang up. And people might be wondering, whoa, what do you mean hang up? Well, I'm not telling you have to do this. I'm just saying these are ideas that you can think about, and you can make your own decision as what you're going to do. This is what I encourage my students to consider doing. So when we call 911, we're volunteering information. And it's why hang up? It's probably what you're wondering. Well, I want to get off the phone as quickly as possible so that my attention isn't divided between my surroundings and the questions the 911 call taker is asking me. In many, many instances, most instances, I'm sure most of you know this, you've seen plenty of, or heard plenty of 911 calls on YouTube. the call taker is going to do what they can to keep the caller on the line until police actually arrive. If it's an incident that involves a gun or a severe car accident with loss of life, loss of consciousness, that sort of thing. So I don't want to divide my attention between my surroundings and the questions I'm being asked by the 911 call taker. So why hang up? Well, why not give them your name? I'm not saying you can't. You decide to do what you want to do. It's highly likely, and it's actually unlikely, that their system won't identify you. So it's highly likely that their system identifies the number that you're calling from. And that's why if you hang up, they're most likely going to call back. Is it a criminal offense to not answer the phone when 911 calls you back? It is not. In this case, it is not. And how hard are they going to try to call you back? They're going to try hard, many times. They're going to try hard to call you back, and if they can get you on the line again, they're going to try to keep you on the line. We had an incident a couple years ago here. It was during the COVID situation, and we live on a big, long lake. It's 24 miles long, and we got a call from the sheriff's office asking us if someone at our address called 911. And at that time, there were only 2 people in the house that had phones, and one of them wasn't even here. But the other person, me, was here, and I knew I had not called 911. I checked my recents in case it was a Heine dial or something like that. But what it ended up being is someone in a boat just offshore had called 911 from their boat on accident. Some fishermen had called 911, and it took a while for them to figure that out. But it's interesting to me that that's how complicated and well integrated the 911 systems are. So it's highly likely that the 911 system identifies you or identifies the number that is calling for help. I like to think of what is the role of the 911 system. My understanding is that the role is to gather information and then pass that information on to the first responders who are tasked with protecting private citizens or protecting society. And the primary role of 911 is, or maybe not primary role, a primary concern of call takers, or let's not say call takers, a primary concern of the 911 system is to get authorities to the scene where, something horrible is happening, some crime or evil is afoot, and so to stop the spread of violence. That's the hope and that's the goal. So if that's the goal, or one of the goals or primary roles or responsibilities of 911, as one famous attorney says, when I call 911, that's not the time to talk. The next group that we're going to interact with is going to be first responders. But before we do that, rather than have a checklist or a method or a script to say when talking with officials post-incident, this is what I encourage my students to do. So my maiden name is McDonald, and this is Old MacDonald's EIO statement principle. So EIO, essential information only. EIO, that's the principle, essential information only. The 911 call takers and the first responders are most likely the people I'm going to be interacting with. My counsel should be the one to interact with investigators and detectives, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. So, Old MacDonald's EIO statement principle, essential information only. In just a minute, we'll talk about what that essential we'll talk about what that essential information is. So I think a script, a pre-memorized script, like I was in fear for my life, that definitely appears in discovery to me, appears a little bit disingenuous, especially if there are other questions or concerns with the use of force encounter. And especially when someone says on body camera, I could just tell you I was in fear for my life, it doesn't come across as being genuine. So Old McDonald's EIO statement principle, what qualifies as essential information? Essential information only. I'm going to communicate essential information only. What is essential information? Well, I want to think about who are the key players and what's their role, what's their job to do? Well, when first responders are responding to the scene, their primary job is to determine is the scene clear or not. They can't allow the AMBO crew, EMTs, paramedics, to come in until the scene is clear. So they need to determine, is the scene safe? So their primary thought is going to be initially, where's the person with the gun, or where's the gun? So maybe saying something like, I'm the one that called 911 and the gun is, and tell them where the gun is at. Not on your person. If it is in your person, in a holster that's secured to your hands, well away from it. If it's a complex environment, there's lots of people around that could access the gun. You don't want to just put it on the ground. So the first thing first responders are going to have to do is determine if the scene is safe. And that involves where's the gun or where's the person with the gun. The second thing they're going to want to do typically is identify the key players, what involves the first one, which is the scene clear or safe? Who are the key players? They're going to ask your name, your address. They're going to ask for your ID, your driver's license, for example. And they may even ask, who is this person to you? Who is this person the paramedics are working on? Who are they to you? And they might even ask questions like, well, actually, if they ask, who is this person to you, it's important to consider, if you're not 100% sure who that person is, making a guess, maybe my neighbor or maybe not. If you don't know who they are, it seems prudent. To be honest, I don't know. They don't live here. This is my house. I live here with my husband and children. Or this is my apartment. I live here by myself. I have no guests over. If you do know who it is, make sure you're 100% sure is what I would encourage anyone to do. Make sure you're sure that you know who it is and say their name. If they don't live there, I would think I'd want to identify that. He doesn't live here, she doesn't live here. I don't know why he or she's in my house. And then the next question I'm probably going to ask is what happened, meaning what led to the shooting. And that's hopefully very simple. He or she attacked me. To all other questions, I want my answer to be something along the lines of, I'm happy to answer further questions after I've talked to counsel, or even, oh, hang on just a sec, sorry. Or even this statement, I do not want to speak without my lawyer present. We're going to talk about in just a minute why that might be helpful. I don't want to speak until my lawyer is present. That's said with deep respect and with the utmost of respect. So the first responders are going to be the people that are wearing uniforms that come in. Most likely the paramedics and EMTs, ambulance crew will have uniforms on, and they're the ones arriving because of the call that you or someone you asked called 911. Or maybe just somebody standing by called 911. So remember, I've just shot someone, and if that's happened, then someone's most likely going to go to jail. Someone's going to go to the hospital, or someone's going to go to the medical examiner's office, and someone is going to jail. So it's important for me to realize that I can't defend myself against an arrest. There's nothing that I can say in that moment that's going to talk those officers out of taking me to jail. I like the idea of identifying yourself to 911 as I'm the one that called 911 to report the shooting. Police may ask you questions over and over, questions like, who are you? Where do you live? Where's your driver's license or ID? Is there a person who cares about you that I can call for you? Questions like that. So who are you? Where do you live? And the same officer may ask the questions. Or, sorry, not the same officer. Multiple officers may come and ask you those questions. I'm going to tell you about an incident that happened near my hometown and the questions that were asked here in just a minute. So another question the officers often ask is, do you have any injuries? Have you been injured? And I think the answer to that is best, I don't know. Because how can you know in that instant? You're in an adrenalized state. You have cortisol coursing through your veins, and adrenaline and cortisol are great pain blockers. I can't tell you how many expert witness cases I've had where the defender tells the officers, no, I'm not injured, but they actually had broken bones. One even had internal bleeding that was severe, but they didn't know it. And it wasn't discovered until they passed out when they were booking them into jail. And then something like, I'm happy, let them know that you're willing to cooperate. Remember that the police officers are going to be writing their reports hours after talking to you. And if it's a busy town or a busy jurisdiction, they're probably going to have a number of calls between your call and when they're going to have a chance to sit down and write the report for your call. So it's something worth thinking about. So there was a case I mentioned just a minute ago that happened in my hometown, and in that situation, there was a husband and wife that were involved in a defensive use of force. The wife was not the one that used force. She just happened to be present when it happened. And I won't go into the details of the case. It's been fully adjudicated. He was prosecuted, charged, prosecuted, charged, however you want to say it. And he was found not guilty. The jury found him not guilty. So in that case, he was asked questions. It was almost like a revolving door of police officers that came up to him and said, you know, hey, where were you standing when you drew your gun? How many rounds did you fire? So imagine several different officers asking those questions in the immediate aftermath of a lethal force encounter. And in that case, the individual said something along the lines of, I was not intimately involved in that case, so I can't, these aren't exact numbers, but said something, I think I fired 2 or 3 rounds. The first officer, second officer comes and asks, hey, how many rounds did you fire? Well, you know, now that I think about it, this is minutes later. Now that I think about it, I think I only fired 1 or 2, maybe I think I fired just 1 round. Another officer, where were you standing when you drew your gun and fired the round? Well, I was standing right here by the end of my car. 20, 30 minutes later, another officer asked a question, show me where you were standing when you drew and fired your gun. I told the other officer that I was standing by my car, but I think I was actually closer to the street, kind of close to the mailbox. And so if you want to change anything that you say while you're under the influence of trauma and in an adrenalized state, how is that going to come across? How's that going to come across to the investigators, detectives, to the prosecutor? Are they going to listen? Or is it going to look like I tried to change my story and it looks like I tried to change the story to benefit my side? And that can often reek of a false self-defense claim. So it's kind of crazy to think of I would be helping the prosecution's case against me that I lied in a case like that. If I make statements in an adrenalized state under the effects of trauma, I don't allow those sleep cycles, I don't invoke my right to not self-incriminate or self-snitch, I could be helping prosecutors form a case against me that I lied, when that's not what it is at all. In parts 1 and 2 of the series, we talked about the human factors that come into play in a critical incident. So maybe something like I've had an opportunity, or I'll be glad to answer questions once I've had the opportunity to recover from the trauma of being attacked and have defense counsel present. Maybe something like that is worth considering. Tom Givens says, we practice our gun handling skills, but we don't often practice our articulation skills. We practice our gun handling skills, but we don't often practice our articulation skills. So I've just experienced an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, and I had to use lethal force to stop the attack. Who do I call first? Do I call 911 first or my attorney? One of the FLP attorneys years ago, one of the firearm legal protection attorneys years ago, said that, and most attorneys I've talked to have said that you're not going to get in trouble for calling your attorney first for legal advice before you call 911. It's going to be, the calls could be seconds apart. And that's where I think something like FLP is key. It's key for any of this. I just think I would be a little bit, I'd be worried about my family if I didn't have FLP, let's put it that way. I want to have them on my side. I want to have their help and their expertise and their experience. So let's go on to the last one, the last group of people. So your 911 call takers, first responders, those are going to be the folks that are usually wearing a uniform or something resembling uniform. And that's in the immediate aftermath. Usually at the scene, you'll be interacting with those folks. And then the last group is typically the investigators or the detectives. So it's possible to have done everything right in a use of force incident. But if I articulate poorly what happened, I could walk myself into a lengthy prison sentence. So the risks of sharing non-essential information with first responders and investigators, well, it's this. 80 to 90% of the state's case against individuals is in situations like this, in claims of self-defense, justified claims of self-defense, are made by the individual. It's built by their 80 to 90% of their case is built by statements that I make or the defender makes. No matter what you say, the prosecution is going to use it against you. I encourage my students to let their attorney handle all communication with investigators and detectives. There's this little handbook that I think is helpful. It's called the Civilian Rights Handbook. Actually, a friend gave this to me because there was one chapter in it about the right to remain silent that they found helpful. That's the part about it that I thought was helpful the most. But here's a quote from page 116. The goal is to assert your rights without escalating the situation or appearing uncooperative in a manner that might provoke unnecessary tension. Let me start that one again. Our goal is to assert our rights without escalating the situation or appearing uncooperative in a manner that might provoke unnecessary tension. So something along the lines of officer, detective, investigator, whatever it is, I mean no disrespect. I do not wish to talk without my lawyer present. We can't just simply remember what we talked about in parts 1 and 2. We talked about there's nothing that the law professor and author James Duane, he said there's nothing you can tell police that will be of any value to your lawyer at your trial, and that's usually because of the hearsay, the laws of hearsay. And then what you tell police, with extremely rare exceptions, will never be revealed to a jury at your trial unless it is offered by the prosecution and is used to get you convicted. Both of those statements are 100% accurate in the expert witness cases that I've been involved with and in the expert witness cases that my colleagues have been involved with. So criminal defense attorney Don West says, if you give a statement to be cooperative, you will say things that will most likely form the prosecution's case that you lied when you actually didn't. So we have a constitutional right to remain silent. The Fifth Amendment, it guarantees that no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. So self-snitching ain't required. So I have that constitutional right, but the Supreme Court has said we have to make a clear and unambiguous assertion of our intent to assert that right. Simply remaining silent is not sufficient to invoke that Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So I was going to read you a little quote from this book that I thought was really helpful. And it says, in the complex landscape of civilian rights, one principle stands out as both vital and often misunderstood: the necessity of explicitly invoking your right to remain silent. The Fifth Amendment guarantees that no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, safeguarding individuals from self-incrimination. However, the practical application of this protection requires more than mere silence. It demands a clear and unambiguous assertion of your intent to exercise this right. It says the Supreme Court has clarified the right to remain silent is not self-executing. In other words, you must literally declare that you are invoking your right to silence. Without an explicit declaration, your silence alone may not trigger the protections against self-incrimination. So, and they go on to say, in order to invoke your right to remain silent, you must state something like, I would like to invoke my right to remain silent, or I do not want to speak without my lawyer present. So we just talked about the three different groups three different officials that you'll most likely be speaking with in a lethal force encounter in the immediate aftermath of a lethal force encounter. Something important that I think, no matter what statement we give, no matter what we say to who, if I'm never going to be the same again if I'm involved in a defensive use of force encounter, no matter how justified it is. I see it for myself all the time in the expert witness cases I do. These folks are changed forever. And while post-incident counseling and therapy help, the person's still never going to be the same again. So even if you think you don't need help, get it. If you've been involved in a situation, we can't stuff the effects of trauma forever. And lastly, that's all I have for you. So I hope you found parts 1 through 4 helpful of you have the right versus the ability to remain silent. And I hope we've talked about some of the key principles of making a statement. Essential information only. That's Old MacDonald's. Get it? Old MacDonald had a farm. E-I-E-I-O. I'm sure you all got that. You're smart people. But anyway, that's the principle. And then I don't want to speak with you without my lawyer present. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you share the information. If you're an instructor, you share the information with those that you teach. And if you're not an instructor, share the information with those you love. Thanks for joining us.